Skoda has form when it comes to small SUVs, but before the arrival of this Kamiq model, it had never previously delivered us a crossover, the kind of more fashion-led, urban-orientated take on cars of this kind that buyers increasingly seem to want. This super mini-based design sets out to deliver that with a dose of simply clever Skoda sensibility.
As you'd expect, the engines featuring here are much the same as those used in the Volkswagen T-Cross and Seat Arona versions of this little SUV design. Few will want the two 4-cylinder options, a 1.6 TDI diesel with 115 PS and a 1.5 TSI petrol with 150 PS, so the majority of Kamiq buyers will end up with a 3-cylinder 1-litre TSI petrol power plant we've chosen for this test. Today we're trying it in entry-level 95 PS guise, but in that form this engine could sometimes struggle to shift nearly 1.3 tonnes of Kamiq about with any kind of real alacrity. Plus, in this guise, this unit can only be had with a 5-speed manual gearbox. All of which explains why the engine that the vast majority of Kamiq buyers choose is the 1-litre TSI power plant in its more natural, more satisfying 115 PS form. In this guise, it can return up to 48.3 mpg on the WLTP combined cycle and up to 113 grams per kilometre of NEDC-rated CO2. Avoid the base 95 PS model and you'll have the transmission choice of either a 6-speed manual gearbox or an optional 7-speed DSG automatic. There's not much to be gained by throwing this car about. Like its class contemporaries, it isn't one you'd buy if keen driving was on your agenda. There's not really enough steering feedback for that. It's quite impressive though that during fast, tight cornering, there's not really that much more cornering roll than you get in the brand's conventional small Fabia and Scala hatchbacks, despite this little SUV's slightly higher centre of gravity. The Kamiq certainly doesn't lurch about. In fact, it can feel relatively agile. As with most Skodas, the suspension setup is really good. Yes, sometimes a little on the firm side, but adept at effectively smoothing all but the most aggressive road undulations and tarmac tears, which is important given this car's primary urban crossover remit. Thanks to a higher than average ride height for a car of this kind, 188mm, you might even be able to attempt a few dry forest tracks, but it'd probably be wise to keep to a paved surface unless you specify the optional rough road pack, which better protects the underside of the car. The styling here is derived from the Vision X concept car the company unveiled at the 2018 Geneva Motor Show, but also draws heavily on the aesthetic already established by the brand's other larger crossover models, thanks to its split-level front lighting strips and prominent front bonnet bulge. Head of design, Oliver Stefani, particularly likes this front end, which features these interesting cross-hatched daytime running lights above headlamps with LED beams, technology that's usually optional in this segment. Let's move to the side. Now, roof rails are fitted as standard, which is just as well as without them. You might struggle to even recognise this as any kind of SUV. The brand points out that this car rides 39mm higher than the Skoda Scala family hatch it's based upon. Its total ride height of 188mm is actually one of the highest in the segment, but there's no body cladding or wheel arch protection to draw your attention to the fact. As usual, what's more important is the stuff you can't see. Yes, this Skoda shares the same MQB A0 platform that you'll find underpinning its Volkswagen T-Cross and Seat Arona segment cousins, but in this case it's been stretched by quite a lot. The wheelbase of this platform is 100mm longer than it is in a T-Cross, for instance, which is why this Kamiq takes up 133mm more pavement space than that car. Let's take a seat at the wheel. A driving position which isn't especially commanding, but does place you 40mm higher than you would be in Skoda's more conventional model at this price point, the Scala family hatch. That car provides most of the cabin design and architecture for this one, which will disappoint the Nissan Juke fashionistas, who will find it a shade on the bland side. Quite a few other potential buyers, though, will appreciate the exemplary ergonomics, the total 26 litres of stowage space, and the fact that there's segment-leading build quality, plus lots of available media tech. Most models come fitted with an 8-inch glass-fronted Bolero centre dash infotainment screen with the usual smartphone mirroring functionality. Pay more or specify top spec trim and you can get this centre screen upgraded to the 9.2-inch Amundsen package we have here, the largest display in the segment. It incorporates 3D navigation, a 64GB hard drive, gesture control activation, an optional Wi-Fi hotspot and a digital assistant that Skoda calls Laura, which claims to be able to understand natural speech. Another option that's standard at the top of the range is this virtual cockpit digital dash that replaces the usual conventional dials in the instrument cluster. Plus, as usual, there are Skoda's so-called simply clever features. Little touches to make everyday life just that little bit easier. Things like the little pockets in the sides of the seats, which also have stowage areas beneath. And our favourite touch, this pull-out umbrella built into the driver's door, an idea borrowed from Rolls-Royce. Time to take a look in the back, and this, we're told, is where that lengthy wheelbase we referenced earlier should really pay off. So let's see. That's broadly how it plays out too. The knee room figure of 73mm is one of the best in the segment, and there's a relatively generous 1439mm of elbow room too. The headroom figure, 1003mm, is also near the top of the class, so 6-foot adults who might normally grumble at the prospect of long-distance rear seat confinement in any Super Mini base model need have no worries about the prospect of riding in this one. What's more disappointing is that none of the rear seat flexibility that used to feature on this model's predecessor, the old Skoda Yeti, has been carried over to a Kamiq. Still, at least the sensible stuff is covered off, or mostly anyway. An optional family pack gives you fold-out rear seat tables and waste bins in the door panels too. Well, once the rear hatch is raised, you'll find yourself looking at a 400-litre boot area you could argue is class-leading. Yes, with a Nissan Juke or a Renault Captur, you can get 20 litres or so more, but this area is arguably squarer and more usable. Unfortunately, you won't be able to take lengthier items without disturbing rear seat passengers because there's no option for a ski hatch or a 40-20-40 seat back split. But once you flatten the 60-40 split backrest, a large 1,395-litre capacity is revealed. In summary, this car lives up to its name, Kamiq being a moniker taken from the language of the Inuit people living in northern Canada and Greenland. Literally, it means something that fits perfectly in every situation, like a second skin. And here's a little SUV we could see you feeling just that way about. And while showy arrivals might apparently better suit your style, when it comes right down to it, this car might more readily suit your life.